Hey everyone, welcome back to another tutorial, and this one is about making this animation loop, and it's completely seamless. It's really cool, and apologies in advance for sounding terrible on my microphone. I'm recording on my phone outside because this is quite a long video, and I want to get it all in one take, so that way I can, explain everything properly without missing anything. So without further ado, let's just get right into the video. First of all, what you want to do is you want to get any of your objects in the scene, delete them, and insert a cube. Once you have that cube, you want to scale it down just a little bit. Just a little teeny tiny bit, Just that much. Just so that it's easier to keep track of. Next up, you want to add a wireframe modifier. And you want to just make sure that it's as thick as you like. But this is a pretty good thickness. The default thickness is pretty good for me, so I just left it at that. Okay, sweet. So now we have that wireframe down, we can add a bevel modifier. What this will do is it will just round off the edges, and you don't want it too much, just a little bit. You're going to be looking at it from pretty far away, so it doesn't really matter. You can shade it smooth, so that way you can just see what it will look like with the bloom on, because when you have bloom it kind of smooths the edges anyways, so you don't really need to turn that on, but you just add a material as well, and that material is very helpful. You don't have to change anything right now, just add it in. Okay, so you have the modifiers and you have the material. You just want to turn off the wireframe and the bevel modifier, just so that it's easier to, see the objects and click them and stuff. But you only want to change them off, like turn them off in the viewport, not in the final render. Okay, so you have this, and now you just want to add in an array modifier. Set the offset to something pretty big. Look, not too big, but just over 1, So you want to make the 20, count 20, and you just want to set the offset something like, I don't know, something like 1.01 or 1.11, basically. So it's fairly far away, but not too much, That's pretty good. Now what you want to do is, you just want to apply that, but not yet. You want to add another array modifier, and set the displacement to 1.11, and another axis, and set the directional one to 0. So it looks like that, and then you just turn that count up to 20 as well. So it's basically a square of cubes. And so once you have that square of cubes, you can just go ahead and apply the 2 array modifiers. Sweet as. Now we got that, we can tab into edit mode. And once we're in edit mode, you can just okay, so once we're in edit mode, you just want to tab into edit mode, okay, and then you want to press P by loose parts. So you're selecting them all and pressing P, and then selecting by loose parts, and now every single cube is its own separate object, which is what you want. Now that you have that, all you want to do is you just want to tab out of edit mode and set origin to geometry. Right, so now every cube is its own object with its own center origin point, which is what you want, right? Now we're going to object, transform, randomize transformation. Now what this will do is it will make it so that you don't have to individually move every single cube. So you can just open that control panel up, and you just want to change a couple parameters. So you can change the location to something and see how it moves a little bit. That's what you want. So I just made mine 1, it looked pretty good, and I just kept going, and I just kept manipulating everything. And so I changed the Y to 1, and it looked pretty good. And then you change the Z to whatever you like as well. And what you want to do now is you want to make it pretty tall, almost as if it's like a big cube. That's what you want to look for. So you get that, and you just want to scale it up just enough so it's pretty square. Nice. So around about there is good. It doesn't have to be perfect, just something that's somewhat good. So you have that, but we're not done yet. See, so this right now is all very square, and it's very uniform and stationary. What you want to do is you just want to select everything again, and this time you want to go into object, transform, randomize transformation, and change the locations all to 0. But now you want to play around with the rotation as well. So we just scroll in a little bit and we can rotate it along the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. So I'm just choosing 15 degrees on the x and y, and for the z I'm choosing 15 degrees as well. What this will do is it'll bring a little bit more randomness. Also, I'm just going to change the scale up a teeny bit, just enough to make it pretty much seem like it's truly random. Not too much. I'm just going to set this up to, like, say 2 on all of them, so x2, y2, and z2. But it still seems like a bit much, so I'm just going to set it at 1.3 on each, because I don't want it to be too drastic, but I still want it to be visible. Right? So now truly every square, every cube is pretty much 99% different from the others. Right? So now that our scene is pretty much done, we can go ahead and set up our camera. So you want to look in where you are and you want to set up this camera, and you want to just position it like you would. And positioning the camera is pretty important because you have to position it in a certain place. So you have to, first of all, bring it in so it's pretty much flush with the highest point, and just bring it towards somewhat where the center is. Now that it's towards the center, you just want to bring it down so it's pretty much flush, and you want to basically go into the camera settings, select the camera, go into the camera, and change the focal length so that you can see more, basically. So you want to see more of the pattern. And you want to bring this lower, but you don't want to bring it too low. You just want to bring it just low enough so that if you go into the side view, and if you imagine the rays of your camera, basically, you don't want them going too far out. So you just want them to go, basically, I'll just hold up, I'll just draw this for you. Basically, you want them to essentially go from the camera to the edges of the square. Right, so if I were to draw a line, it would be from, so that's like, you don't want it too far, but basically you just want it like there. So you just want it at the corner of the square. That's where you want it. And then if you draw a triangle, that's basically what you want to see in your scene, right? So you change the focal length to so that it resembles that triangle basically from the top view. And once you have that, then you can move on to the next step. Okay, so now that we have this, we have it set up, this is roughly where you want it. And I'm happy with this, so I'm just gonna basically select everything. So I'm just gonna select all the cubes and everything basically, just by pressing A. First, you can move your lamp around. It doesn't really matter that much, but select everything just by pressing A or whatever. And then you just want to press Shift D to duplicate. And then press Z to snap it to the Z axis, right? And you just want to put it down just enough so that it almost overlaps, but not really. So it's as if it was just grown. And then once you're happy with that, you want to press Shift and R. And what Shift and R will do is it'll repeat the last action that you did. So my last action was duplicating in the Z axis by this much, so it'll do that again. And then if you press Shift R again, it'll do that again, and again, and again. And I did this around about 7 times. You can do it how many times you like, but the more times you do it, you'll notice the slower and slower it gets, the harder and harder it gets for your computer to actually make those duplicate objects. So you don't want to overload it too much, but a number like 6 or 7 works good. Now that you have that, I'm just loading in my final ones. And so now that I have that, all I want to do is I just want to go into my my objects, and I want to delete the last cameras except for the first 2. Make sure you do not delete the first 2 cameras. It's very important because the first camera is actually what you're going to use, and the second camera is going to be used as a guide. Okay, so now that we have this, we have the perfect scene, and we have everything set up, just the cameras need to be manipulated. So go on to camera 1 and see how it's selected. So basically, you want to go into like the primary camera, right? And you just want to press I and then input the keyframe for that specific spot, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press I. Also, you can change how long the actual animation will be. So for me, it's 200 frames, but you can change it to whatever you like. If you want it faster, you can set it to less frames. If you want it slower, you can set it to more frames. But basically, when doing it, I'm just setting I, and then I'm setting the location at frame 0. That's very important. Now you go into frame 200, and then you search for the second camera, which is camera 001, if you're following along. So you have camera 001, and you go into the object settings, and then you see that Z location, you just copy that global Z location, and then you go onto your primary camera, and then you paste it into the Z location of your primary camera, and then you press enter, and then you press I to insert a keyframe. And basically what that does is, now it'll move it exactly into the position of your second camera, right? So if you look through the animation, it will be a perfect loop, and it will go through the cubes, and it will start again where it left off on the first camera. Now you can just delete that camera, the second camera 001, you can delete that. So now you only have one camera in your scene, and then you just want to look through if you like. You can just wait and watch how it goes basically through all the cubes, and then it ends up exactly where the second camera was. So that will make the perfect loop, basically. That's how the perfect loop works. Okay. So now that we have that, you just want to select both keyframes and set the interpolation type to linear. What this will do is that it will keep the same speed of moving down the z-axis throughout the entire time. Then you want to go into playback and then enable subframes. What this will do is it'll make the playback more smooth. So if you have a weaker computer like I do, then it'll make it so that it basically goes through the animation more smoothly and more like you can actually follow along instead of having dropped frames or really slow playback, which is quite confusing in this complex scene. And just by the way, don't worry if there's two cubes that intersect, because if you look at it in the final render, they won't actually intersect because the wireframes will just be linked in. It will just be like a chain basically. So it really doesn't matter if two cubes are intersecting. So don't worry too much about that. Don't go changing that, because that actually kind of brings in the effect of it having links, which is quite cool. So as you can see, I'm just moving through animation, and it looks pretty good right now. So I'm just moving through, and I know it's clipping a lot, but that will be fixed by the wireframe, because I won't be going through the wireframe, we'll be going through the gaps, which will look even cooler. So basically I'm just going through that, and as you can see, as soon as I hit frame 200, it loops back, but you can't even tell because it's a perfect loop because of how we set it up. So once we have that set up fully, and once we're happy with that, it's really a matter of just basically just texturing things now. So first you want to set this up to an emission shader, and you just want to set this to any color you like. Preferably a warm white is good. I've found that really works with me, because if you have a warm white and then you composite it later, that warm temperature can be converted to cold extremely easily. So I like to have a certain hue on my whites so that I can change them later. And you obviously want to set the background to black. And so once the background is black and you set the emission shader, you want to find a good frame that you can see everything, and you want something to just, you just want to visualize it, what it will look like. Just want to press file and then render, and then render image. And you just got to wait a little bit, and then the image will render out for you. And then you can tell where, like, how everything is going to look, somewhat how everything is going to look at the end. So you just got to wait a little bit. It might take a little while for you, might not, but for me this is what it looks like. And this is pretty good, but I want it to look a little bit better. So I want to have lens distortion on the sides, and I want the overall color to look quite futuristic and a little bit more cold. So I went on to compositing. You take use nodes, and then you insert a viewer node. And now, since you have that viewer node, You just plug it into the image of the render, and now you have that. Then you want to go into just dragging that back, and helpful tip to do that, what I just did right there, is you hold down shift and then you right click and you just drag across the two lines. I think it's shift or it's alt. It's one of those two. Shift or alt, one of those. But yeah, you just right click and you just drag and then it connects those up. It's pretty cool. Right, so now you just want to enter a brightness and contrast node, and you just want to play around with this, whatever it looks like. You can change however it looks. You can change it in the end, but this is basically what you want to have in the end. So this is what the final render would look like. Sweet, so you can just do that. Once I cleaned everything up, I'm just turning up the contrast a little bit so that some of that bloom is suppressed, because the bloom is a little bit strong for me. So also I added in a hue correct node, and what this node will do it'll basically strengthen or weaken certain hues in your image. So if you plug in the image on that, and then you plug in the image to the image at the end, then you can just test out what it would look like in the end. So you can just basically play around with that. So I want more blue in mine, so I can just plug that in to there, and then it doesn't really change much because there isn't that many blues in the image, but you can just play around with like the reds and the yellows. So if I play around with the yellows, then you can see that I indeed like have some difference in my image, right? So I am happy with how this looks, and so I'm just like moving everything around, cleaning it up, because it's gonna get quite hectic. So I just want to see how this will all look in the end. But basically I just want to change the hue around a little bit just to see what it looks like, you know, just playing around. But basically I want it to look pretty futuristic, so you know, not too drastically warm. I want it to look a bit cold, so I'm just moving it into these certain different values. Now I'm just going to add in a lens distortion node and plug that at the very end. So after all the compositing is done, I want to lens distort it after that. So I have my lens distortion node, and I just want to set the distortion to something. But if you see, like, the distortion, it doesn't really change how it looks. It just makes it go inwards like an old TV screen, which I don't want. So I want it to disperse. This is what I want it to look like, right? So I have the dispersion on, and I'm just setting the center to make it so we can see the whole screen, and I'm just setting it to jitter, and as you can see, like, it's like a little bit noisy. So if I set it to jittered, you can see that it's like a little teeny bit noisy, and I like that because then it actually looks quite, you know, it looks pretty good. So I have it in jittered, and then I get a mix RGB node. I just put that there, and then I can plug the lens distortion into that, and then I can mix it with another lens distortion. And this time I won't make it jittered, so that way the jittering and the non-jittering combine basically, and they turn it into a semi-jittered image. If you could even call it, I don't even know what I can call it, but like it looks a little bit better to me, because the jittering and the non-jittering, like it just like mellows it out, and then it makes it look pretty good, which I like. Now this looks pretty good, but in order to make both of the values the same, I added in a value node, and then what this will do is it'll allow me to change both parameters at the same time, basically. So I plug both of the value node into the dispersion, and then I change that to say 0.08, and then it basically changes it for both of them, and then when I composite it, it composites for both. You can also play around with the different blending modes. So you can choose divide, you can choose multiply, you can choose whatever you want. Honestly, I was just mucking around, but I came up with some pretty cool end results, and you can too. You just have to play around a little bit, see what works with you. But yeah, so I'm just literally playing around. This one looks pretty good. I mean, if there was an animation that looked like this, it would look pretty good. But I was just mucking around. I was just trying to see what works, what doesn't work, and so yeah, I just basically just looked at what's happening. Honestly, this is the first time I was playing around with this as well. I hadn't played around with it before, but I was just looking at the different blending modes and how they work with different lens distortions. So yeah, it made it look pretty good. But in the end, I just settled with mix, because mix in the end is like just putting them both together in their respective amounts, essentially. But yeah, I got with add and it looks pretty good. I turned the brightness down a little bit, but it didn't seem to change much, because it's still compositing, but it only changed the dark areas to dark. It didn't really change the white, and that was I didn't really like that very much, so put it back to 0, and then I just basically I just duplicated it, and I tried putting it into the end result and then trying to put the brightness down, and I don't know, it just didn't really seem to work that well. So I was just mucking around. I was just seeing what worked, what didn't work, but I was just seeing the brightness values, because this is a little bit bright for me. So I was just looking around and seeing if I could change anything to make the brightness a bit lower. And yeah, so I was just basically seeing that. And then I also tried turning down the saturation for the entire image. And so I just plugged that in, and with a hue saturation node, obviously. And I tried turning the saturation down, but what that did is just dampen the color. And I want it to be quite colorful, but not too colorful, like just a little bit colorful, you know? So I tried turning the value down, and that didn't change much either. So I was just thinking about what I could do to make it look like super intricate, even in the middle, with there's tons of things going on. It's like super hectic. So I was just trying to see what I could do to basically change that middle part to make it look as I intended to make it look. So yeah, I just changed that blending mode back to mix, and it did look pretty good in the end, because I turned the value down so it was a little bit more black, less bloom, and that looked pretty nice to me. But it was still a little bit warm, so I just tried to go back onto the... I was looking through, and then I thought about how I can change it onto the, on the after render settings. So I tried doing that, but whatever you do, make sure that you have the end result connected into the composite node as well, because once you render out the animation, we would want the end result of the composited node to also render that end result, right? You don't want it to just do it like an experiment. You want to actually implement it into the animation. So basically, you're just setting your render settings, and you want to set this to FFmpeg on the output, and change the type to H.264 in MP4, and then set the encoding output quality to perceptually lossless. Right, so now we have all those settings done. That's the export settings, and then you just want to set a certain destination that you want the file to be saved. So I'm just saving mine on my desktop. Alright, so I've saved the animation on my desktop. Now it's just a matter of rendering. But before I do that, I just want to go into color management real quick and tick use curves. Now when I use curves, it'll allow me to change the overall color of the image. So I'm just playing around a little bit, and I came across this little dampened S across the diagonal, and it looked pretty good, because the middle values, the midtones are pretty high, and the shadows, the black is super black, which I like. Next, I just changed the red on the black value to something like 0.11, which looked good. It looked pretty blue. Looks kind of like the Matrix type of a tint. And I just changed the settings. I was just looking around. I was trying to see what works best, and I came across this. So red values on the black is 0.002, and white value on the red is 1.25, and that worked really well. So I clicked render animation, and then it rendered each frame, composited it, and then it's packing it into the MP4 right now. And then once it packs into the MP4, then we know that it is working and it's functional. So once this all renders, it'll render up to 200 frames, and then it will stop, and then it will save to whatever you saved it as. And then once it's saved, you can view the animation, and then it will be completely done. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And you can just watch mine render each frame by frame. I mean, this is like sped up to like crazy fast, because this render took like 4 or 5 hours. But this is sped up, so you can see how it renders the original image, and then it renders the composited image, and then it does that for each image. And if you look at it, there is a separate loading bar for the rendering, and there's a separate loading bar for the compositing. So each process is different. But once you get that all rendered up, then that's the animation done. And if you look through it, and if you just put it into any video player that can loop it, then it will pretty much loop endlessly. And also if you put it on Instagram, it'll also loop endlessly. But if you put it on Instagram, don't forget to tag at JHuntsLab, because that cred goes to me, you know. Cred is due where cred is due. It is what it is. It is what it is. It is what it is. Anyways, thanks for sticking along with me on this amazing tutorial where I had so much background noise that it was extremely distracting, but you stuck through it. And I'm proud of you. You know, you persevered, and you really learned something today. And I'm glad. I'm really happy that I could be the one that taught you what you learned today. Thank you. Bye-bye. And have a very nice day.